This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Please take your seats. Thank you so much for everyone that has worked to make this a possibility, from the food to the flyers to the advertisement, and especially people who have made the time to come out, have a packed house. Baruch Hashem. I want to thank again Yaakov Tubi for a very, very diligent work to make this a possibility from the get-go of about 2 months ago to actually bring this to a reality with a lot of back and forth. And Baruch Hashem, here we are with our dear guest speaker, Glatstein. It's been a true pleasure to have the Rabbi with us. We had him also for a meal on Shabbat morning, which was a different dimension of hosting him. Tremendous work has been put into all the Sfarim that you see on the tables, and it's real material. It's not just people copying and pasting from one place to another. It's real work that has been reviewed 7-8 times until it's brought to fruition as a sefer. I highly recommend you should take bracha to your home, to take the Sfarim with you. If you don't have any of the ones that are on the table, if you're missing any of them, get it, and get it for friends as well. It's been an honor and a privilege and a pleasure to have Rabbi Glatstein with us. Has been very enlightening in the insights of the Torah that he has shared, and it's an honor to call upon him to share with us some words of Torah.
Morning, everyone. It's been a real pleasure spending the Shabbat and the weekend together with you, especially to bask in the shadow, we could say, of the great Rav that you have. There's a very dramatic difference between regular Kedusha and Kedushat HaTorah. In other words, there's a very big difference between something which is only an item of a mitzvah and something that's connected to the Torah. So, for example, you have a shofar. You don't need it anymore. What do you do with it? Throw in the garbage. Me'ikar hadin, you could throw it in the garbage. You want to pour coffee through it into your cup, you want to use it to siphon, you could do that. Let's say you have tzitzit, you're done with it. You want to play tug-of-war, you could play tug. The Rama says, don't treat it disrespectfully, but there is no halacha, there's no requirement of genizah. What about ritzuot of tefillin? No, that you have to bury. What about the box that you put the tefillin in? You got to bury that. What about mezuzah case? You have to bury that. That's tashmishei kedusha. What's the difference between tashmishei mitzvah that are nizrakin and tashmishei kedusha that you have to bury? The difference is, the Nefesh HaChaim writes, there's a difference between a mitzvah and Torah. A mitzvah, tefillah, tzitzit, shofar, lulav is only a mitzvah. So its kedusha is only as so long as you're performing the mitzvah. Once you stop performing the mitzvah, the kedusha is no longer there. But anything associated with the Torah, in your tefillin, they're parshiot of Torah. So the boxes have kedusha. For how long? Forever. The straps have kedusha. For how long? Forever. The mezuzah case, it housed the parshiot of Torah that has kedusha forever. You don't need it anymore, you have to bury it. Why do we bury a Jew? We bury a Jew because a Jew learned Torah. Oivdei kechavim mazalois nizrakin v'lo nikbarim, because they have kedushat mitzvah. They do a sheva mitzvos b'nei Noach, but they don't learn Torah. So there also, we have to understand, there's a difference in a shul, whether it's just based hakneses, or if it's elevated into the status of a Beit Midrash, a shul, that you have a Rav who gives shiurim around the clock in all miktzayos of Torah. This is an eternal building. This is an eternal Mossad. It's an eternal institution. If you want to know, what do I show my support to? What do I invest in? This is not a better investment. This is S&P 500. This is top investment. So I want to share with you a very important question. What would you say is the main theme of Rosh Hashanah? The subject that receives the most attention. Which historical event is focused upon on Rosh Hashanah more than anything else? And clearly the answer is Akedat Yitzchak. Akedat Yitzchak gets the most attention from anything. First of all, the Gemara Rosh Hashanah Tezayin Mabei says, why do we blow shofar shel ayal? Why don't we take an elephant tusk? That would be geschmack, right? Imagine if before Rosh Hashanah we went to the jungle, we had to capture an elephant, get the tusk, and we blow the elephant tusk. Right? You like that one. Like, how did he come up with that one, right? Elephant tusk. I don't know. Why shofar of an ayal? The Gemara says to remember Akedat Yitzchak. In Zichronot, we say, Sachreinu, B'zikaron tov lefanecha, Ufakteinu, B'fkudas Yeshua v'rachamim, Mishmei Shmei Kedem, Ki kol zoicher kanishkacha isatahu me'olam. You sing it that way? V'ein shikcha lefnei chiseche voidecha. Va'akedas Yitzchak lezaroi b'rachamim hayom tizkar. Remember the Akedah. What's the Kriyas HaTorah of the second day of Rosh Hashanah? Akedat Yitzchak. Shulchan Aruch says, in terms of the simanim, where we make the hiratzon sheyiyah l'rosh v'lo l'zanav. Just as an aside, a very interesting idea. Rav Shimshon Pinka says, what's the idea we should be a head and not a tail? So simply it means we should be a leader and not a follower. But it means more than that. He says, very often, you know who we're a follower of? We're a follower of ourselves. Like 5 years ago, we decided to really get into davening and to have kavanah. And now, 5 years later, we're basically just lagging behind and trailing behind that original inspiration, but we're not keeping up the inspiration. In other words, I am doing the mitzvah today. It's just, I'm keeping on doing what I was doing, but there's no freshness, there's no vitality. So Yiyah l'rosh, that every day we should be leading the mitzvah and not dragging behind something we decided in the past. So we take a chai, and we say, Yiratzon Sheyeh l'rosh v'lo l'zanav. What kind of chai? You know what Shulchan Aruch says? Ayal, a ram's head. I actually have a friend in Cedarhurst, Rabbi Yossi Bodner. Every year he buys me a ram's head. And, it's not that comfortable, let's say, for the Rebbitzin. She has to cook the ram's head, So we have to try to make, but he gets me a ram. The Shulchan Aruch says, I know you probably get a fish's head. No, that's not what it says in Shulchan Aruch. Shulchan Aruch says you get a ram's head. Why do you get a ram's head? You could get any head. Get a coin and get Abe Lincoln on the kind of Sheyeh l'rosh v'lo l'zanav. We'll get his head. No, the Shulchan Aruch says. Get the rosh of an ayal. Why? Also to remember Akedat Yitzchak. Now this is a very interesting one. You guys do kaparot, yeah? You use chickens, right? Ashkenazim figured out a way to get around this. But the Sfardim, they still use the chickens. And the Mishnah Berurah brings, if you're not going to use a chicken, use a fish. And the Chayadim say not going to use a fish, use money. So Ashkenazim, we keep our hands clean. We write out a check. And the Meiri says no chickens, and no fish, and no money. Meiri writes, you should use ayal. Okay, I want to see this I want to see this here in Pico. Everyone get it ayal. Imagine Erev Rosh Hashanah, after your 4.5 hour slichot, you go to the shlachtois and you get a ram. Why a ram? The Meiri says. Meiri says to remember Akedat Yitzchak. Because what's that? What's kaparot? Kaparot is to remember that Avram Avinu took ayal instead of Yitzchak. So kaparot is a reenactment of Akedah. So the Meiri says, so then you should do it on Rosh Hashanah. He said, of course you should do it on Rosh Hashanah. You do it Erev Rosh Hashanah. Again, we don't do this. I think nowadays everyone does it before Yom Kippur. But the Meiri says original custom, in Provence at least, was to use ayal. So we see that Akedat Yitzchak is the central historical event that we remember on Rosh Hashanah. That's one simple question. What, Akedah is the most important thing that ever happened? It's the only time, it's the only mitzvah that anybody ever did in history. Yitzchak Avinu never did anything good. Yaakov Avinu never did anything good. Moshe Rabbeinu never did anything good. Akedah. Well, that's the only good deed in our arsenal that we could invoke before the high holidays. When we're standing there, when our life is on the line, the only thing we could come up with is Akedat Yitzchak. I mean, don't we usually say, Mishana Avram Avinu, Mishana Yitzchak, Mishana Yaakov? I mean, they all have Ma'asim Tovim. Avram Avinu was not the greatest person who ever lived. Yaakov was, according to the Medrash, Yaakov was greater than Abraham. Moshe was greater than both of them. We can't come up with something this is the only thing we could come up with? So most people would say, yeah, but Akedah happened on Rosh Hashanah. And Rosh Hashanah is the anniversary of the Akedah. Really? Is that true? Does anybody know when the Akedah happened? So yes, the Psikta says the Akedah happened on Rosh Hashanah. So maybe you say, according to Psikta, Siman Mem, since Akedah happened on Rosh Hashanah, we want to invoke this great deed on the day that it happened. But not everybody agrees it happened on Rosh Hashanah. You know, Yalkut Ruveni, on the Akedah, writes, the Akedah happened on Yom Kippur. So what, according to Yaakov Raveni, we got the whole thing wrong? According to Yaakov Raveni, we should blow shofar on Yom Kippur. And according to Yaakov, we should read about the Akedah on Yom Kippur. And we should say Zichronot on Yom Kippur. Drashot Even Shva'ib, he also says, Akedah happened on Yom Kippur. So then what are we so busy with it on Rosh Hashanah? Medrash Rabbah, maybe the most authoritative, says Akedah happened, not Rosh Hashanah, not Yom Kippur, Chodesh Nisan. So then, according to the Medrash, we should blow shofar on Nisan. You guys, 40 days you woke up for Slichos, you got the wrong month. Forgot to tell you. This year you're going to get up in Nisan again? So what does the Akedah have to do with Rosh Hashanah, according to the many, many opinions that didn't happen on Rosh Hashanah? So I want to share with you a very powerful idea. And it comes from 3 words in the tefillah of shofarot. We say, Ki ata shoymea kol shofar. You hear the sound of the shofar. Umazin teruah, and you're attentive to the teruah. V'ein doi melach, there's nobody like you. Baruch atah Hashem, shoymea kol teruat amo Yisrael barachamim. Blessed are you, God, you listen to our shofar. There are 3 words here that seem like, I don't know, like they just fell into the tefillah, and ein inyano kan. They don't seem to be connected. We say, you hear the sound of the shofar, you're attentive to the trua, and there's no one like you. Ma shmita itzel har Sinai. What's that got to do with the price of tea in Pico? Why are we saying there's nobody like you? You could say the words, there's nobody like you, in any tefillah. Ein kelokeinu, ein kadonenu, kamalkeinu, ve'ein domelach. You give me tefillah, I could stick in ve'ein domelach. Ma tovu alecha Yaakov, ve'ein domelach Adon olam, Hashem alach ve'ein do. Why are we sticking it in shofarot? Another question. The Torah writes something very interesting. He says that typically if somebody was being tried for a capital case, they would be very nervous, they would be very anxious. It's not, on that day, it's not like they would be able to go to their hairstylist and get a nice haircut and put on their nice suit. They don't have time to groom themselves. They don't have time to look good, to wear their best clothing. They're going to come into the courtroom disheveled, unkempt, because who could focus on appearance when your life is on the line? But says the Torah, we are not that way. We wear white. We shave. We haircut. We cut our nails. We eat. We drink. We rejoice on Rosh Hashanah. Lefi sheyoidim, because we're confident. Shahakadosh Baruch Hu. Fill in the blank. What would you say? I would have said, we know God will have mercy on us. We know we'll have a ketiva tova. The Torah says, we know Shahakadosh Baruch Hu yaseh lohem nes. we know God will make a miracle for us. Miracle? What miracle? Miracle happens on Rosh Hashanah? Maybe the miracle is that you could sit in your chair for 7 hours straight. What miracle happens on Rosh Hashanah? So, do you know of any miracles? I know on Pesach a miracle happened. Sukkot, Rosh Hashanah, there are no miracles. In fact, Shaus Tshuvas Halachos Ketanois asks, the Gemara in Erechina asks, why don't we say Hallel on Rosh Hashanah? Says Halachos Ketanos, why don't we say Hallel? Why should you say Hallel? The only time you could say Hallel is if a miracle happened. No miracle happens on Rosh Hashanah. So there seems to be some kind of miracle that perhaps we're not even aware of. What is this miracle? So the clue to answer this question is found in a halacha in Shulchan Aruch Siman Reish Chaf Hei. If you have a friend, you don't see your friend for 30 days, we don't observe this anymore. You make a bracha. What's the bracha? She'achiyanu v'kimanu v'giyanu lazman hazeh. Fine. So let's say we don't see each other for 30 days. You come to visit me in a month. You come to Cedarhurst. You can come to my house anytime. Whether I open the door or not, that's a different question, right? But you could come at any time. And then in 32 days, I see you, I make a bracha. She'achiyanu v'kimanu v'giyanu lazman hazeh. And what if I haven't seen you in a year, and you come to visit me, I say, Baruch Atah Hashem, Mechayeh HaMeitim. Now we don't do this anymore. We make a Mechayeh HaMeitim because back in the day, if you haven't heard about someone's welfare, you have no way to know if they're alive or not. So if I haven't seen you in a year, maybe you're not around anymore. So if I see you, Baruch Hashem, Mechayeh HaMeitim. But nowadays, there's all kinds of technology. Did you hear about the technology that's available today? Morse code. They came out with Morse code, where you could, click, 1 click, 2 clicks, radio waves. They came up with all kinds of modern day technology that I know what's doing with you, even though I don't see you. So these brachot are not observed anymore. I do not believe. But the Marsha has a very important question. The Marsha's question is, so if I don't see somebody in a year, why would I make the bracha Mechayeh HaMeitim? So if you're still alive, Hashem didn't resurrect you. Hashem just kept you alive. So the proper bracha should not be, blessed are you God that you brought this person back to life. The bracha should be, blessed are you God that you preserve this person's life. But there's no resurrection taking place. It's not like if I haven't seen you in a year, you went to Har Menuchot, and they dug a big hole, and they put you in the ground, and they covered you over, and they said, Kel Malei Rachamim. And then a few days later, you popped out. The guy never died, so if he never died, well, we make him Mechayeh HaMeitim. Says the Marsha, and the Mishnah Berurah quotes it word for word, that we have a fundamental error of what takes place on Rosh Hashanah. We think on Rosh Hashanah, we stand before God and we say, Almighty, in 5782, I was alive. Keep it that way. 5782, I had livelihood. Keep it that way. In 5782, I had a family, I had a wife, I had children. Preserve it. I'm the muchzak. I have status quo. All the blessings of life are in my pocket. Do me a favor, keep it that way. Or maybe we even think, God, just stay out of my business. I have everything I need. Just don't interfere. That's how we stand before Hashem on Rosh Hashanah. That's not what happens. Arizal teaches us, Rav Moshe Shapiro would say over, that the lease of Rosh Hashanah is a 1-year lease. God gives life for 1 year. He gives livelihood for 1 year. He gives family for 1 year. He gives health for 1 year. When that year is over, and you stand before Hashem on Rosh Hashanah, you're standing kemeis mamash. You're standing like a mess. You have no life. You have no health. You have no family. You have no children. You're ani ve'evyoin suma, everything, nothing. The person has nothing. He's not asking Hashem to keep the gifts that he has. He's asking Hashem to re-gift chayim, briut, nachat, mishpacha. You're asking Hashem literally for the greatest gift in his arsenal. You know what the greatest miracle in the arsenal of Hashem is? The resurrection. You know, Hashem could perform many, many great miracles. I always like to talk about this one. I don't know, is specifically astounding to me. You know, the way the heart operates, so the blood goes to the right atria, then goes to the right ventricle, but the blood needs oxygen. So the right ventricle pumps the blood to the lungs oxygenate the blood. The blood then goes back to the left atria and to the left ventricle and then to the body. But in a baby's lungs are not functioning yet. So how does a baby get oxygen? It's through the mother's umbilical cord. So then, if the oxygen is coming through the umbilical cord, then the heart does not have to pump it to the lungs. So it doesn't. So what happens? There's a hole in the baby's heart. In the fetus's heart, there's a hole from the right atria to the right ventricle. From the right atria to the left atria. And it just goes from one side of the heart to the other, because it doesn't have to go to the lungs. Now, how long would it be possible for a person to survive with a hole in their heart? Not even for a moment. So who seals the heart shut? The moment the baby is born, the baby cries. It creates pressure in the chest cavity, and the heart is sealed shut. No doctor, no insurance, no referrals, no waiting, nothing. It's unbelievable. And if that process does not work, the baby cannot survive. It happens, one in 1,000, 1 in 1,000,000, that process doesn't work, and you know how many surgeries are necessary to correct that? So that's a great miracle of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But that is by far not Hashem's greatest miracle. There's one miracle, which is the greatest miracle of all, that we say about this miracle: there's nothing like you, Hashem. You know what that miracle is? The Gemara in Gittin tells us somebody was on a boat, and they jumped off the boat. Girls jumped off the boat to avoid being violated. So now if somebody falls off a boat, so I'll tell you a little secret. They took me on Thursday on a boat out into the Pacific Ocean, and we went to a place called Drop-Off. Drop-Off is where the ocean drops from like 200, 300 feet to 500 to 1,000 feet, because over there you have maybe whales. We weren't zoicha to see the whales, you know. But anyway, the boat made a little bit of a turn, and Vayiman Hashem Ruach Gedolah, my glasses blew off, and they're now on the bottom of the Pacific Ocean. I don't know, maybe there's a shark somewhere. If you see wearing glasses, those are my glasses. What if somebody falls off a boat? They fall to the bottom of the ocean. After time, their basar is decomposed on the bottom of the floor. Their bones are scattered to the 7 seas. The great day comes of Tchiyat HaMeisim. What's going to happen to this person? Says the Gemara, Amar Hashem mi bashan ashiv mi mitzulas yam. I will gather every molecule of this tzaddik from the 7 ends of the world and reconstitute their molecules and bring this person back to life. This is the greatest miracle in Hashem's arsenal. It's the miracle of Tchiyat HaMeisim. Do you know how we refer to this miracle? Mi chamoicha ba'al gevurais umi doi melech meimis umechaya. God can not only take away life, He could give life back. You know what we call that? Umi doi melech. Nobody like you. I'll give you another example. Ein ke'arkecha v'yein zulasecha. Efes botecha umi doi melech. There's nobody evaluated like you. There's nobody but you. There's nothing except for you. Umi doi melech. Ein ke'arkecha ba'olam hazeh. V'yein zulascha la'olam haba. Efes biltecha limos hamashiach. But ve'ein doi melecha l'tchiyat hametim. That is the pinnacle of Hashem's ability. Therefore, says Rav Moshe Shapiro, if we are invoking the words Ve'ein doim elach in shefarais, what miracle are we referring to? We are clearly referring to the great miracle of Tchias HaMesim, which means that on Rosh Hashanah, that when we stand before HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we're not asking Him to preserve, to guard, to keep, to maintain. Rosh Hashanah is not maintenance. Rosh Hashanah is not when you call in, every couple of years in the 5 towns, you got to call in a plumber to make sure the sewer line is still good. That's maintenance. You have your landscaper come for maintenance. You go to the dentist once a year for maintenance. This is not maintenance. Rosh Hashanah is not maintenance day. Don't walk into the shul on Rosh Hashanah cocky, confident. Rosh Hashanah, you enter before God like a mess, like an ani, all alone, and you ask Hashem not to continue, but to give again. To literally resurrect a person. That's what's taking place on Rosh Hashanah. But the Torah says we have a degree of confidence that a miracle will take place. What's the miracle of Rosh Hashanah? Tchiyat HaMesim, the resurrection. Shal Shachuvas Halachos Katano says the reason why the Gemara has a Havamina to say Hallel on Rosh Hashanah. What do you mean no miracle takes place on Rosh Hashanah? Of course a miracle takes place on Rosh Hashanah. A great miracle takes place on Rosh Hashanah. The miracle of the resurrection is what's taking place on Rosh Hashanah. That would warrant Hallel. The only thing is we don't say Hallel because it's too solemn of a day to say Hallel. Ki ata shoymea kol shofar. You hear the sound of the shofar. Umazin trua. Ve'ein doim elach. There's no one like you, Ribbana Shalom. You could take us. That we're mesim. We have no capacity for further life, for further blessing, for further happiness. And you could literally resurrect us. Now, one last point. What's this got to do with the shofar? Why invoke the resurrection in the context of the shofar? So simply put, the shofar also, one of the 10 reasons of Rab Sadia Gaon that we blow the shofar is because the shofar will inaugurate the era of Tchias HaMesim. But I think there's another dimension as well. The Rabbi Yonasan Eibeshitz, in the Yaros Devash, he quotes the Zohar HaKadosh. The Zohar HaKadosh says on the words, Vayipach be'apav nishmat chayim. And God blew into our nostril a living spirit. The Zohar says, He blew kibal tokeya, like someone who blows the shofar. What's the connection between the blowing of the shofar and God blowing life into Adam HaRishon? Rabbi Yonasan Eibeshitz says, the nose even looks like a shofar. The shofar looks like a nose. He explains that the blowing of the shofar is reminiscent of a great blowing that transpired on that day. On the day of Rosh Hashanah, a great blowing took place. What was the great blowing? The first blowing in history. Vayipach be'apav nishmas chayim, the creation of life, the gift of life. That when God gifted life to man, it was like the blowing of the shofar. He instilled it in his nose. The blowing of the shofar then is literally the moment that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is resurrecting us for the whole year. And that's a very powerful moment then. Rabbi Yisrael Salanter talks about that the blowing of the shofar is like going into the Kodesh HaKadoshim. It's like going into the Holy of Holies. Now going into the Holy of Holies is a very frightening moment. Many people did not make it out of the Holy. Now, this is very important in general. You know, when you daven Shmona Esrei, it's like going into the Holy of Holies. Now, imagine, just as an aside, and I hope it's okay I say this. So if davening Shmona Esrei is like going into the Holy of Holies, let's say a Kohen Gadol had a cell phone. Would he say, okay, I'm just going to put my cell phone on vibrate when I go into the Holy of Holies? Or would he just put it upside down in front of him when he goes into the Holy? No. Kohen Gadol makes sure not to bring it into the Holy of Holies. You don't bring, that's the same thing in a shul. In a shul, you don't take a phone and you put it upside down in front of you so that it could distract you at every moment. It does not come in. It does not come in. Really? No one's allowed to? Yes, Goyim are allowed to bring a cell phone into a shul. Jews don't bring it into a shul. You have a medical emergency, I don't know what to tell you. Marat ayin, I don't know. It's not recommended. In the shul, you don't bring it in. It doesn't belong. But certainly, that's the kind of feeling we have to have standing before HaKadosh Baruch Hu on Rosh Hashanah. We're not asking for continuity. We're not asking for maintenance. There's a very alumdish kasha, Rabbi Ezel Charif. The question is, Rabbi Yossi in Masechta Rosh Hashanah says a person is judged every single day. So he asks, if a person is judged every day, so what are we getting so worked up about on Rosh Hashanah? There's a daily judgment. He said, yeah, there's a daily judgment. But in the daily judgment, there's something called chazaka. There's a presumptive status. Yesterday I was alive. Yesterday I was healthy. Yesterday I have livelihood. Yesterday I had family. So today, unless HaKadosh Baruch Hu has good reason to take it away from me, it will continue. I'm the muchzak. I'm in possession of it. God is the moitzi. God is trying to take it away. The burden of proof is on Him on the daily judgment. Not so on the judgment of Rosh Hashanah. The judgment of Rosh Hashanah, God is the muchzak. We're the motzi. The life is now in His hands. The money is in His hands. Our family is in His hands. The onus and the burden of proof now rests on our shoulders to wrestle it back into our back pocket. And that's a very big responsibility on Rosh Hashanah. Now we're confident in Hashem's rachamim. That's why the Torah says we wear white, because we're banim lamakim. And we're confident our Father is going to give us a year of happiness and success and well-being. But it's still a very tenuous moment. And we say, Rebbeinu Shalom, we know you're going to do it. You hear the sound of the shofar. You're attentive to our truah. We awaken the memory of the original blowing of the shofar when God instilled life into Adam Harishon. And it said, Rebbeinu Shalom, we know you're going to do it again. Ve'ein doime lach. Right here, in this Beis HaKnesset, in our community, in our guf, the Rebbeinu Shalom is going to perform the great miracle of Tchiyat HaMesim. So next time you say the bracha, Micha Moicha Ba'al Gevurus Midam Lach Melech Meimis Umachaya. So, really? When did that happen? That's what happens every year on Rosh Hashanah. So, in the zchus of our coming together this Shabbat, this weekend, this morning, to prepare ourselves for the Yom Tov of Rosh Hashanah, may HaKadosh Baruch Hu bless all of you with the Hashanah Tova Mevareches, with the year of good health, happiness, nachas from your children, livelihood. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful day. Thank you. Okay. And now the punchline, before we forget, and then we'll conclude this time for good. So why is the Akeida such a essential, integral, central part of Rosh Hashanah? Why do we invoke it again and again? The shofar reminds us of the Akeida. Zechroinos, we invoke the Akeida. Tashlich, the purpose of Tashlich is to remind us of the Akeida. The Mishnah Berurah says from the Maharil that we do Tashlich, we go to a river because at the Akeida, Avram Avinu was stopped at a river. The Satan masqueraded as a river, and Avram Avinu went up to his nostril and he said, Hoshieni, Kivo Maim Ad Nofesh. Why is the Akeida so central to Rosh Hashanah? Kaparos, to remind us of the Akeida. The answer is, when is the first time in history that someone in this world experienced the resurrection of the dead? Who was the first person who was resurrected? Shiba Haleket brings in Siman Yud Ches. It's brought in the Oitzer Midrashim, Vayosha, page 149, and Pirkei Rabbi Elazar, Perek Lamed Aleph, where the first time someone ever experienced Tchiyas HaMesim, actually, they say that the Shemona Esrei is a record of various historical events. The first bracha, Magen Avraham, is when Avraham Avinu was thrown into Ur Kasdim and Hashem saved him. And Avraham Avinu said, Baruch Atah Hashem Magen Avraham. And then the second bracha is a record of when Yitzchak Avinu was at the Akeida. It says, Perkei de Rabbi Elazar, when Avraham Avinu put the knife on the neck of Yitzchak, Yitzchak was so frightened. Parcha nishmasai! He died, he expired, his soul left him. But then, when the voice resounded mi bein shnei akruvim, al tishlach yodcha el hanar, his soul was returned, and he stood up, and he saw, there's Tchiyas HaMesim, that the dead are going to come back to life. Yitzchak said, Baruch Atah Hashem Mechayei HaMesim. So we're not invoking the Akeida. This is brought in a sefer of my good friend, Moshe Schwerd, in his beautiful sefer Az Yasher. We're not invoking the Akeida because it happened on Rosh Hashanah. As we mentioned, not everybody agrees it happened on Rosh Hashanah. We're invoking the Akeida because what's the Shoresh? What's the original act from which we draw annually God's ability to resurrect the dead? It's the Maseh Avos Simin Labanim of the miracle that occurs on Rosh Hashanah is the Maisa HaAkedah. So as we recall that and recount that and remember that and we recall it to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we're drawing on that. We're saying, Rivan Shem, you've done this already. And therefore, Maseh Avos Simin Labanim. That's the centrality of the Akeida on Rosh Hashanah. So again, may we all be Zoicha, that as we remember the Akedas Yitzchak, and we blow the shofar, and we perform all these minhagim, tashlach, kaparos, we call upon that great event for HaKadosh Baruch Hu to give all of us resurrection, revivification, a resurgence, more a renewal of life and all of its blessings. Wishing everyone Shana Tova Vayreches Aksiva Chesima Tova.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.